Alhamdulillah wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadi lazina astafa amma ba'd. In light of recent events and our present day situation, I wanted to remind myself and you that as Muslims, what should our attitude be? How should we react to whatever is going on in the world? Many of us, we are already aware that throughout the world, masjids, they had to make a very difficult decision with the Jummah prayer. Many masajid, they opted to cancel the Jumu'ahs, and I believe this is for the greater good. This is the logical decision, this is the rational decision. Otherwise, it looks that, moving forward, it looks as if Ramadan is going to be spent at home rather than in the masjid. And the masajid, as we very well know, these are beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We would like to spend the month of Allah in the house of Allah. We would like to spend the month of Allah in the house of Allah. So, keeping this in mind, just moving forward, how should we react? What should we be doing? Our scholars say that during times of tribulation, during times of hardship, as Muslims, we should be turning to Allah. Ar-ruju' ilallah. There was an occasion during Muqtadi Billah's time. He was a 5th century Abbasid caliph. An epidemic, it ravaged the area of the region of Baghdad. So he told the population, he told the Muslim population that you need to turn to Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar. That engage in enjoining good and forbidding the evil. And engage in a'mal salihah. Engage in good deeds. And this is how we should react. That occasions like this, we should be concerned about our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We shouldn't be concerned about how much we can stock up. And this is what many people, they're concerned about. They're concerned about stocking up, how much we can stock up. And that's fine to some degree. This is something that we need to do. But that shouldn't be our sole and primary focus. Our focus should be on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeking forgiveness from Allah, and giving as much sadaqah as possible. Because by virtue of sadaqah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alleviates many difficulties. Allah will remove this plague. Allah will remove these difficulties by virtue of giving sadaqah. So as Muslims, our reaction today should be ar-ruju' ilallah, turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, focusing on how to become a better Muslim and how to better my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mentioned in my khutbah 2 weeks ago that plagues, epidemics, this is not something specific to just this era, just this time. There have been occasions throughout history where the Sahaba, they also were afflicted with plagues. They also were afflicted with difficult situations. You have the plague of Amawas. This is mentioned in many books. This is mentioned in many books of history. This is mentioned in Hadith, that the plague of Amawas, it took the lives of many illustrious companions. It took the lives of 25,000 companions. You have companions such as Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah, companions such as Mu'adh bin Jabal, Abu Jandal. They lost their lives in the plague of Amawas. So this plague was a difficult moment, a trying time for the Sahaba. After Abu Ubaidah passed away, after Mu'adh bin Jabal passed away, after many illustrious companions passed away, the people, they decided to make Amr ibn al-As their governor, their leader. Amr ibn al-As, he noticed that people, they were living together, they were living in close proximity. So he thought that perhaps it would be better that people take to the mountains, people take to the valleys and separate themselves from one another so that they're not giving the sickness to each other. And this is something that many of us, we are practicing. We're practicing social distancing. We're practicing staying away from one another, separating from one another. And this is in line with how the Sahaba, they reacted. This is in line with how Amr ibn al-As, he reacted. So he said in very clear terms that, perhaps this is afflicting us a lot more because we are close together, and we are bunched up together, and perhaps we need to separate, we need to take to different areas, valleys, so as not to give this sickness to each other. So uh, there's another there's another moment that comes to mind. This took place in 448 of the Islamic year. It corresponds to 1056 of the Common Era. So masajid, they were forced to close down due to epidemics in Islamic history, because number one, there was nobody to pray, and number two, many of them, they understood that these plagues and epidemics, they spread with close contact. So they would close the masjids. They closed the masjids, and they didn't have Jumu'ah. They did not have adhan, because one of the objectives of adhan is what? Is to call people towards the salah. It's to call people towards the salah. So they stopped the adhan. They stopped the adhan. They prevented people from coming into the masjids. Imam Dhahabi rahimahullah, he mentions it in his Tarikh al-Islam. Ibn Kathir mentions it. Ibn al-Athir mentions it. Ibn al-Jawzi mentions it. So all of them, they mention that in 448 of the Islamic year, an epidemic took place, a drought occurred, there was an epidemic, and there were so many deaths during that time that people, they couldn't bury their bodies. And this led to many diseases because the bodies, they were unburied. This plague, it struck the lands of Andalus, Spain, Egypt, Iraq, and it led to closure of mosques throughout the region, throughout the lands, because so many people had passed away. Even Hajj, it was cancelled from Iraq. So people, they couldn't go for Hajj during that year. This was how bad it became. Ibn al-Jawzi al-Dhahabi, they mention that the situation became so desperate and dire that there was inflation, prices skyrocketed. 4 chickens were worth 1 gold dinar. A dinar is approximately 3 grams. There's 3 grams of gold in 1 dinar. So how much is 1 gram today? About $45. So do the math. If we do the math, imagine the inflation of that time. The dead, the people who died, they were buried without being washed or covered. And he says, Imam Zahabi rahimullah says, that the air was polluted. The air became polluted. And this indicates that it was possibly an airborne infection. There was flies everywhere. In Egypt, 1,000 people died per day. And this only became worse over time. So much so that the Sultan, he had to pay for 18,000 funerals with his own money. 18,000 funerals with his own money. Masajid, they were mass closed in Andalus. Other areas were afflicted to such a degree that people, they started to call this year Amul Ju', the year of hunger. The year of hunger. Now what does this teach us? This teaches us that trying times have passed before us. This is not something new. The Prophet ﷺ experienced difficult moments. The Sahaba, they experienced difficult moments. So trying times, it's not like we're experiencing something unprecedented. So trying times have passed before us, and they're a test for us as to how we overcome and come together. These trials, they aren't unique just to us. Humanity has faced much worse prior, and we will inshallah overcome this. The only thing that is unique is how we face them. So we can overcome with the power of Iman that teaches us what? That afflictions show us who we truly are. That when we are stripped of everything material, your true Iman, your true soul, it is displayed. It is that soul that is judged by Allah. It is that soul that is judged by Allah. So we have to reflect deeply, and we should discover in this time who we truly are. That are we people truly focused on amassing as much grocery as possible? Yes, that's important. And I understand that is important, that we need to take care of our families. But is that our sole focus? Or is our focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So we have to reflect deeply and discover in this difficult situation who we truly are, and we have to find ourselves in finding our creator and reconnecting with what our purpose is as human beings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, إِن يَمْسَسْكُمْ قَرْحٌ فَقَدْ مَسَّ الْقَوْمَ قَرْحٌ مِثْلُهُ. مثل وتلك الأيام نداولها بين الناس وليعلم الله الذين آمنوا ويتخذ منكم شهداء والله لا يحب الظالمين. That if you have suffered affliction, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, similar affliction has touched others before you. We alternate these days amongst people so that Allah may reveal the true believers. So, and that Allah chooses martyrs from amongst you, and Allah does not love the evildoers. In another verse, Allah mentions, وَإِن يَمْسَسْكَ اللَّهُ بِضُرٍّ فَلَا كَاشِفَ لَهُ إِلَّا هُ وَيَمْسَسْكَ بِخَيْرٍ فَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. If Allah touches you with affliction, no one can remove it except Allah. And if He touches you with good, He has power over all things. So from these ayat, from these verses, what do we understand? We understand that affliction is not something new. There were afflictions that prior nations they experienced. They experienced. And Allah mentions that we alternate these days amongst people. Why? So that Allah may reveal who the true believers are. Who are the people who are connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Who are these people? This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to determine. Allah already knows. Allah already knows. But Allah judges us based on these hardships to ascertain and to show how we are reacting. How exactly are we reacting to this present situation? And that we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during these trying times. This is what it's all about. That we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during these difficult moments. And we are not concerned about hoarding and amassing as much as possible. And this is just a side point that as Muslims, we should be considerate for other people. We should be considerate for other people. There are so many Muslim-owned stores that, subhanAllah, I don't understand, but the prices of everything, they're skyrocketing. As Muslims, we shouldn't take advantage and exploit the situation just because things are becoming difficult, right? This is something that the Prophet ﷺ has prohibited. And it's a shame that when Muslims, they have stores, they are raising the prices of groceries, and they're making life difficult for everyone. People who actually need them, they are unable to afford those expensive groceries because the Muslim store owners, they made this decision of raising prices. So as Muslims, we should understand, we should be considerate. The Prophet ﷺ, he taught us the importance of empathy, being considerate for our fellow man, for our fellow neighbor, for our fellow human being. This is what the Prophet ﷺ has taught us. So the message that I want to get out there is that these afflictions, they are not something new. Muslims before us, throughout history, they were afflicted by these epidemics, by these pandemics, by plagues, by diseases, and what they did during these times was turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give sadaqah as much as possible, and Allah, inshallah, by the will of Allah, this will be alleviated from us. Allah will remove these afflictions from us. In Imam Dhahabi rahimahullah mentions that the situation became so dire and it became so severe that the masjids had to close down because due to the spreading of severe infections. So this is very similar to what we are currently encountering, what we are experiencing. And if anything, we should understand that this is an opportunity for each and every single one of us to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to better our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Jazakumullah khairan.